Stuck all night with my alien roommate during her wild season. Nothing prepared me. Ethan had always been a laid-back guy. He liked his space, his quiet nights, and the comfort of routine. But that all changed the day he moved into his new apartment. He was excited to start fresh, away from his old neighborhood and the boring monotony of university life. What he hadn't expected was the strange roommate that came with it. Lyra was different. Ethan didn't realize at first just how different. She had this unusual way of moving, as if every step was carefully calculated, as though she was aware of something that he was. Her eyes, a shade of blue so deep they almost seemed to glow in the dark, were always studying him, always reading him in a way that made him feel like an open book. She was beautiful, there was no denying that, but it wasn't just her looks that made Ethan uneasy. There was something about her presence that didn't quite fit with the rest of the world. She de-introduced herself calmly on the first day, speaking in a soft voice that was both warm and distant. "Hi, I'm Lyra. I'll be your roommate for the year. I hope we'll get along." Simple. Polite, but there was an air of mystery around her, something unspoken, something that Ethan couldn't quite place. At first, he thought she was just another quirky student. Maybe she had a different background or came from a place with a different culture. But that didn't explain the little things, the way she moved too quickly for human reflexes, or how she seemed to know exactly when he was about to knock on her door, even if he hadn't made a sound. Ethan brushed it off as his imagination getting the best of him. After all, he had just moved from a small town to a bustling city, so maybe he was just adjusting to the new environment. But over the next few weeks, it became harder to ignore the oddness of Lyra's behavior. She would go on long, silent walks at night, sometimes coming back with a strange, almost feral look in her eyes. She'd spend hours in the apartment, staring out the window as if waiting for something, or someone. One evening, after a long day of classes, Ethan came back to find Lyra acting even stranger than usual. She was sitting cross-legged on the couch, staring at her hands. Her skin seemed to shimmer faintly in the dim light of the room, and there was a strange energy in the air that Ethan couldn't place. He'd never felt anything like it before. "Hey, Lyra," he said, trying to sound casual. "Everything okay?" She turned to him slowly, her gaze meeting his with an intensity that made his heart skip a beat. "I'll be fine," she replied, her voice steady but distant. "It's just my time of year." Ethan frowned, unsure of what she meant. "Your time of year." Lyra gave a soft laugh, though it didn't sound particularly happy. "Yes, my species goes through seasonal changes. It's complicated, but I'll be fine. You don't need to worry." He didn't press her further. It wasn't uncommon for people to have their quirks, and Lyra had definitely been giving off odd vibes since the start. But there was something in the way she said it that made him uneasy. Something about the phrase seasonal changes didn't sit right with him. That night, as he tried to sleep, Ethan heard strange noises coming from Lyra's room. At first, it sounded like the gentle hum of a machine, but as the minutes passed, the sound grew louder and more erratic. It was like something was being pulled and stretched, like a force beyond his understanding was shifting the very air around him. Unable to ignore it any longer, Ethan got up and knocked on Lyra's door. There was no answer. He knocked again, louder this time. "Lyra," he called, his voice trembling slightly. "Are you okay?" This time there was movement from within. The door creaked open just enough for him to see her face, her eyes wide, almost glowing in the dim light of her room. There was a strange, wild energy around her that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand up. "I told you, Ethan," she said in a soft but firm tone. "I'll be fine, but it's starting now." Ethan was about to ask what she meant, but before he could, she closed the door quickly, leaving him standing in the hallway, confused and more than a little worried. The next few days were the strangest he'd ever experienced. Lyra's behavior became more erratic, her mood shifting rapidly. One moment, she would be calm and collected, and the next, she would be pacing the apartment, her eyes wide and filled with a strange, unexplainable intensity. She didn't tell him what was happening, but Ethan could sense that something was building, something powerful that was about to explode. He began noticing more unusual things. Lyra's food choices became even stranger. She started eating in large quantities and things that Ethan wouldn't normally expect a human to crave. Her appearance would change slightly, her features becoming sharper, her movements more fluid and intense. Ethan couldn't help but feel like he was living in a constant state of heightened awareness, like he was always on the edge of something he didn't quite understand. And then, the night came. Lyra had told him it would, but Ethan hadn't believed her. He came home late from class, exhausted, only to find the apartment in total silence. It was too quiet. He called out for Lyra, but there was no response. The place felt empty. As he made his way toward the living room, he stopped dead in his tracks. Lyra was standing by the window, her back to him. Her figure seemed almost unreal, bathed in an ethereal glow from the moonlight streaming through the glass. She turned slowly to face him, her eyes now bright with an unmistakable intensity. "Ethan," she said softly, almost in a whisper, "it's starting." Before he could respond, the air around them seemed to crackle with energy. Ethan's heart pounded in his chest as he realized that the strange, otherworldly things he'd noticed were far more than he had ever imagined. Lyra wasn't just a quirky roommate. She wasn't just a student from another country with strange habits. She was something else entirely. Ethan stood frozen in the doorway, staring at Lyra as she turned slowly to face him. There was a wild energy about her that made the hair on his arms stand up. Her eyes were brighter now, almost glowing with an intensity that he hadn't seen before. Her once calm demeanor was gone, replaced by something more primal, something that hinted at a side of her he had never known. She smiled, but it wasn't the soft, polite smile she usually gave him. It was a more jagged, uncertain smile, as if she were holding something back, something dangerous. "It's starting now," she repeated, her voice low and soft, but there was an edge to it that made Ethan's heart race. He didn't know what she meant. The energy in the room seemed to pulse with an almost physical presence. It felt like the very air around them was changing, shifting, as if something was waking up inside Lyra. Ethan took a step forward, his mouth dry. "Lyra," he said, his voice trembling slightly, "what's happening to you? What do you mean, it's starting?" Her gaze never left his, and for a moment there was silence between them. The only sound was the hum of the lights overhead. Then she spoke, her voice tinged with a strange mixture of urgency and reluctance. "My people, we go through seasons," she said, her words slow and measured, as if she were trying to explain something that was both personal and difficult. "There's a time every few years when we change. It's not just physical, it's everything. Our emotions, our powers, they all surge and we lose control. We call it the wild season." Ethan felt his stomach tighten. The words felt heavy in the air and he struggled to understand what she was saying. "The wild season? What do you mean you lose control?" Lyra took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she held them together. "It's hard to explain. We don't usually live around humans. Our species isn't designed to coexist like this. During this time, we feel everything more intensely. Emotions become amplified and our physical abilities change. Some of us can't control it." Ethan could hear the fear in her voice now, and it struck him harder than he expected. He had always thought of Lyra as strange, but hearing her talk like this made everything seem so much more real, more intense. "You mean you're not? You're not in control?" he asked, his mind racing with the possibility of what this could mean. "I try to be," she said softly. "But sometimes it's too much. I need to be alone during this time, Ethan." "I can't," she stopped, shaking her head as if she were trying to fight the urge to say more. Ethan felt his heart race. He had known there was something off about Lyra, but now it was all making sense. The strange behavior, the way she seemed to lose herself sometimes, the little bursts of energy that didn't make sense. It was all part of her species, wild season, something he had never heard of before. "Lyra, you're not going to hurt anyone, are you?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. His pulse quickened, the anxiety in his chest growing. Lyra's eyes softened, and for a brief moment her expression became almost apologetic. "I don't want to hurt anyone," she said, her voice quiet and shaky, "but I can't promise that I won't." The tension in the room was suffocating now. Ethan couldn't think. He had never imagined something like this, never thought that his roommate wasn't just a strange person, but an entirely different species with powers beyond anything he could have imagined. He felt a mixture of fear and fascination. "Is there anything I can do to help?" he asked, the words slipping out before he could stop them. He wasn't sure why he asked. Maybe it was out of sympathy, or maybe it was because something in him wanted to understand, to help. Lyra's eyes flickered to his, a brief flash of surprise in them. Then she shook her head. "No, you can't. You need to stay away from me while it's happening. It's dangerous if anyone gets too close." The air between them felt charged, and Ethan wasn't sure if he should leave or stay. His mind was spinning, trying to process what Lyra had just told him. But before he could think more about it, Lyra turned abruptly, heading toward her room without saying another word. Ethan hesitated for a moment, then followed her. He didn't know why. Maybe it was because he was worried. Maybe it was because he wanted to understand more about what was happening. But as he stepped into the hallway behind her, the sounds that came from her room were enough to make him freeze in his tracks. There was a strange humming sound, like something deep within her was vibrating, something powerful and alive. The sound seemed to fill the apartment, a low thrum that shook the walls and made the air feel thick. Ethan hesitated, unsure if he should knock, but before he could, the door opened. Lyra stood in the doorway, her appearance subtly changed. Her eyes were brighter now, like stars in a dark sky. Her skin shimmered faintly, and her posture was unnervingly still, as if she were holding herself together with sheer willpower. "I told you," she said, her voice distant and detached. "Stay away. This is not something you can fix. You'll only make it worse." Ethan nodded, feeling a lump form in his throat. He had no idea what was happening, but something told him that Lyra's warning wasn't something to be ignored. "I'll stay out here," he said quietly, not knowing what else to say. Lyra's gaze softened, and for a moment there was a flash of something like regret or sorrow crossing her face. But it was gone almost as quickly as it had come. "Thank you, Ethan. But you need to understand. Once the wild season begins, there's no going back. I'll change and I can't stop it. I just need you to trust me." Ethan stood there, unsure of what to do or how to react. The room felt charged with an energy he didn't fully understand. He could hear Lyra breathing, her chest rising and falling with the intensity of what was happening inside her. "Do you want me to leave?" he asked, the words coming out before he could think about them. "No," she answered quickly, her voice firm. "But you have to stay away. Just for tonight." Without another word, she closed the door, leaving Ethan standing in the hallway. The apartment was eerily quiet now, but the tension in the air remained, thick and heavy. Ethan leaned against the wall, trying to wrap his mind around what was happening. He had no idea what Lyra was going through, but one thing was clear. Whatever it was far more than he had bargained for. He could hear the strange hum in the walls again, and he couldn't shake the feeling that something huge, something dangerous, was just beginning. As the hours passed, Ethan couldn't help but wonder how long it would take for Lyra to regain control. Or if she ever would. The night dragged on, each minute stretching longer than the last. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling of unease that had settled over him. The air around him seemed thicker somehow, charged with an energy he didn't understand. Lyra's warning echoed in his mind, "Stay away, but trust me." It was hard to know exactly what he was supposed to do. He had never imagined that his seemingly normal roommate was anything but human. Now everything had changed. Ethan found himself pacing the apartment, his thoughts racing, unable to settle. The sounds from Lyra's room hadn't stopped. At first they were quiet, a faint hum. But now it was louder, more intense, like the very walls of the apartment were vibrating. He could hear the rustling of something, too, a soft shuffling that seemed to come from deep within the walls. It was unnerving. Every few minutes he would stop and look toward her door, unsure if he should check on her. But Lyra had been clear. She didn't want him near her while she was going through her wild season. Still, curiosity gnawed at him. What did she mean by all of it? Her people, her species, the season she kept referring to. How did all of it fit together? He didn't have the answers, but he was beginning to feel that he needed to know. After what seemed like hours of restless pacing, Ethan finally couldn't take it any longer. He grabbed his phone and sent a quick text to Lyra. "Are you okay? I'm really worried about you." He stared at the screen, waiting for a reply. When nothing came, he dropped the phone on the couch and walked to the window, looking out at the city below. The lights flickered in the distance, like tiny stars scattered across the dark. Suddenly, the door to Lyra's room creaked open. Ethan's heart skipped a beat, and he turned toward the sound, half expecting her to come out in some sort of wild, uncontrollable state. But instead, Lyra appeared in the doorway, standing motionless with her back to him. Her figure seemed almost ethereal in the low light, like a shadow made of something otherworldly. "Lyra," Ethan said, his voice soft, almost hesitant. She didn't answer right away. When she turned to face him, her eyes were different, wider, the pupils dilated as if she were seeing something beyond the apartment, beyond him. She seemed distant, as though she were looking right through him. "I'm sorry, Ethan," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't want to drag you into this. I thought I could handle it alone. But now I realize I can't. I need to tell you everything you deserve to know. Ethan swallowed hard. His throat felt dry and his heart pounded. He was unsure of what she meant, but one thing was clear. Whatever it was more than he could have imagined. Tell me, he said, his voice steady despite the nervousness creeping up inside him. Lyra took a slow step into the living room, her eyes still filled with that faraway look. I've been avoiding you because I didn't want you to be caught up in my world, but now I can't hide from it anymore. She paused, as if gathering her thoughts. I'm not from Earth, Ethan. I'm not human. I'm from a planet far away, and my species is different from yours. Ethan felt a chill run down his spine. He had suspected something strange about her, but hearing it confirmed was something else entirely. Different how? He asked, struggling to keep his voice even. Lyra sighed and ran a hand through her hair. My species, the Velari, have a cycle. Every few years we go through a period called the wild season. During this time, our bodies and minds undergo extreme changes. We become stronger faster, but we also lose control. It's a dangerous time for us. Ethan took a step closer, his curiosity getting the better of him. What kind of changes? You said you lose control. What does that mean? Lyra's expression darkened as she looked at him. It's not just physical, Ethan. It's everything. Our emotions, our powers, our very sense of self. During the wild season, we become a little wild. We can't control our impulses. Sometimes we hurt those around us without meaning to. She paused, her voice trembling. I didn't want to hurt you. I didn't want you to get caught up in it, but now it's happening. I feel the change inside me. It's getting stronger and I can't stop it. Ethan's mind raced as he tried to process what Lyra was saying. She wasn't just some strange girl. She was an alien, a being from another world, experiencing something that was beyond anything he could comprehend. You said you lose control, he repeated slowly. But you can't. You can't hurt me, right? Lyra looked at him with a mixture of guilt and sadness in her eyes. I don't want to hurt anyone, but the wild season, it makes it hard to keep myself in check. The energy is too much to handle. Ethan felt his heart beat faster. The wild season, he couldn't even imagine what that must be like for Lyra. He had known her as his roommate, as someone who was just a little different. But now he was realizing how much he didn't understand about her, about the alien inside the girl he'd lived with for weeks. Is there any way to stop it? He asked, his voice tight with concern. Lyra shook her head, her shoulders slumping as if the weight of the world were on them. No, once it starts, there's no turning back. It has to run its course. But don't worry, Ethan, I'll be fine. You need to stay away. I don't want you getting hurt. Ethan felt a pang of guilt. Here she was, telling him something so personal, something so terrifying, and all he could do was stand there, unsure of how to respond. I can't just leave you alone, he said, his voice soft but firm. You're my roommate. I'm not going to just walk away from you. If there's anything I can do to help, I'll do it. Lyra looked at him with something like disbelief in her eyes, and for a moment he wasn't sure if she would laugh or get angry. But then, to his surprise, she smiled, a small, sad smile. You don't understand, she said gently. You can't help me. This is something I have to go through on my own. For a moment, Ethan didn't know what to say. He wanted to argue, to tell her that maybe he could do something, anything, to make it easier for her. But as he looked at her, he saw the weariness in her eyes, the exhaustion that came from trying to fight something far beyond her control. I'm not going anywhere, he said quietly. I'm not leaving you alone. You don't have to go through this alone. Lyra's gaze softened, and for the first time since the season had begun, she seemed almost at peace. Thank you, Ethan, she said, her voice barely a whisper. The two of them stood there for a long moment, the weight of everything hanging between them. Outside, the city buzzed with life, but in the apartment it was silent except for the sound of their breathing. Ethan wasn't sure what was coming next, but one thing was certain. His life had changed forever, and so had his relationship with Lyra. There was no going back. The hours passed slowly, and the tension in the apartment remained thick. Lyra hadn't left her room for most of the night, and Ethan was starting to feel a mix of frustration and concern. He didn't want to leave her alone, especially now that he knew more about what she was going through, but he didn't know what he could do to help. Lyra had been clear, she didn't want him near her. But something in her voice, something in the way she looked at him earlier, told him that she didn't want to be alone either. She had shared her secret with him, trusted him in a way that she had never done before. Ethan knew he couldn't just sit idly by while she struggled through this wild season. He stood in the living room, pacing again, his mind racing. The more he thought about it, the more he realized how little he actually knew about Lyra's species and what they went through. The idea of her wild season was still overwhelming. He had barely begun to grasp how deep her transformation ran, and the fear of what might happen next kept him on edge. He remembered the way Lyra had spoken earlier, how she had said she couldn't stop what was happening, that she had no control over her emotions or powers. He had to believe that, but it didn't stop the nagging feeling in his chest. There had to be something he could do. Ethan's thoughts were interrupted by a soft sound from Lyra's room, a low hum barely audible but growing louder. He froze. The noise was different now. It sounded almost like chanting, as though Lyra were speaking in a language he didn't recognize. He stepped cautiously toward her door, his hand resting lightly on the handle. "Lyra!" he called, his voice barely above a whisper. The chanting stopped instantly, and for a moment there was complete silence. Ethan waited, unsure if he had done something wrong by interrupting her, but then Lyra's voice came through the door. "Ethan," she said softly, "I didn't mean for you to hear that." He hesitated before replying. "What was that? What's happening in there?" There was a pause before she spoke again, and this time her voice sounded less distant, more tired. "It's a ritual, a part of the wild season. My people, the Velari, have a way of controlling the energy that builds up during the transformation. It's the only way to prevent us from losing complete control." Ethan's curiosity flared, and he found himself drawn to the door. "A ritual? Can you show me? Maybe I can help." Lyra didn't answer right away. When she did speak, her voice was softer, more vulnerable. "I don't think you can help, Ethan. It's something that only my kind can perform, but I can teach you. If you want to understand, I can show you how to help me." Ethan felt a surge of hope. If there was something he could do, anything, it was better than sitting by and doing nothing. He nodded even though he knew Lyra couldn't see him. "Yes, please, I want to help." A few moments later, the door creaked open and Lyra stepped into the hallway. Her appearance had changed again. Her skin shimmered more brightly now, and her eyes glowed faintly in the dim light. The energy around her was palpable, almost electric. Ethan took a cautious step back, unsure of what to expect. "I know this is hard to understand," Lyra said, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "But the ritual is something that every Velari must go through. It's a way to balance the power inside us. Without it, we lose control, and the results can be disastrous." She motioned for him to follow her, and Ethan stepped into the room. It was the first time he had really seen Lyra's space up close. The room was simple, but there were strange markings on the walls, symbols he didn't recognize. They seemed to glow faintly, almost like they were alive, pulsing in rhythm with the energy Lyra was giving off. "What are these symbols?" Ethan asked, his voice filled with wonder. "They are part of the ritual," Lyra explained. "They help guide the energy. We use them to direct the flow to keep from losing ourselves. Without them, the transformation is uncontrollable." Ethan nodded, absorbing every word. "And you want me to help guide the energy too?" Lyra nodded slowly. "You can't fully participate, but there's something you can do. You have to be a stabilizer." Ethan's mind raced, trying to wrap itself around everything Lyra was saying. "A stabilizer? What does that mean?" Lyra gave him a small, tired smile. "It means that you'll help me stay focused. Your presence will calm the energy. The more grounded you are, the more it will help me stay in control." Ethan didn't fully understand, but the seriousness in her eyes made him want to try. "Okay, I'll do whatever I can." Lyra led him to the center of the room, where a large, glowing circle had been drawn on the floor. The symbols from the walls seemed to converge here, forming a web of light that filled the space with an almost hypnotic glow. "Stand in the center," Lyra instructed. "Keep your mind clear. Let the energy flow through you. Don't fight it. Trust it." Ethan did as she asked, stepping into the circle. The moment his feet crossed the boundary, he felt a jolt of energy shoot through his body. It wasn't painful, but it was intense, like static electricity, but much more powerful, more alive. He gasped, his body tingling as the energy swirled around him. Lyra stepped into the circle next to him, her hands raised, her voice chanting softly in a language that felt ancient, alien. The symbols on the walls began to glow brighter, and the energy in the room seemed to intensify. Ethan closed his eyes, trying to focus, to ground himself, but it was difficult. The energy was so strong, so overwhelming. "Breathe, Ethan," Lyra said, her voice soothing. Focus on your breath. Let the energy settle. He nodded, doing his best to follow her instructions. As he focused on his breathing, he felt the energy begin to flow more smoothly, less chaotic. It wasn't gone, but it was more manageable, less violent. His mind cleared as he steadied himself, and slowly he began to feel a strange sense of connection with Lyra. The energy in the room started to shift. The glow from the symbols on the walls pulsed rhythmically, matching the beat of his heart. Lyra's chanting grew louder, more intense, but it felt like it was in sync with him, as though their energies were aligned. For a moment, everything seemed to click. Ethan realized that the ritual wasn't just about controlling the energy, it was about trust. Lyra was trusting him to be her anchor, to help her stay grounded while she faced the chaos inside her. And he was trusting her, too. He had never imagined this kind of connection with another person, let alone an alien. As the ritual continued, Lyra's energy began to calm. The glow from her skin softened, and the intense aura surrounding her seemed to settle. She was still glowing, still alien, but the wildness in her eyes had diminished. She seemed more centered, more in control. Ethan felt the last of the energy dissipate as the ritual came to an end. Lyra lowered her hands, her voice falling silent. The room slowly returned to normal, the symbols dimming, the glow fading. "That's it," Lyra said quietly, her voice tired but relieved. "You helped me, Ethan. You were the stabilizer I needed." Ethan exhaled slowly, his body still buzzing from the experience. It felt real, like I was part of something bigger than both of us. Lyra smiled faintly, her eyes warm with gratitude. "You were, thank you." The air between them felt different now, more peaceful. Ethan still didn't fully understand everything that had happened, but for the first time since this whole ordeal began, he felt like he had done something right. The wild season wasn't over yet, but for the first time, Ethan believed that it could be managed. With Lyra by his side and his new understanding of her, maybe they could both survive whatever came next. The night was still young, but everything felt different now. The tension that had hung over the apartment for what seemed like hours had finally started to fade. Ethan stood by the window, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance, but his mind was far from the quiet streets below. It was still hard to believe that everything had changed so quickly. Lyra had retreated to her room after the ritual, and though the air in the apartment had calmed, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling of awe and confusion that lingered. He had learned more about Lyra in one night than he had in the weeks they had lived together. But there was still so much he didn't know. He didn't fully understand what it meant to be Velari, and he wasn't sure how much Lyra was willing to share with him. Ethan looked toward her door, wondering if she was all right. He had seen a change in her during the ritual. It wasn't just physical. Her emotions were more stable now, less intense. She had seemed so much more in control, but even now, as he thought about it, he realized that the wild season wasn't something that could just disappear. It wasn't something that could be fixed in one night. The sound of a door opening interrupted his thoughts. He turned quickly, and there she was, standing in the hallway, her figure bathed in soft moonlight. Lyra was different. She looked the same, but there was something in her expression that had shifted. The intensity in her eyes had softened, and she seemed less alien. She smiled at him, but it wasn't the same jagged, uneasy smile from before. It was something quieter, more genuine. "You're still up," she said softly, stepping into the living room. "I didn't mean to keep you waiting." Ethan gave her a small, tired smile. "I couldn't sleep, too much to think about." Lyra nodded, her eyes filled with understanding. "I know, it's a lot to process." There was a long pause, neither of them sure what to say next. Ethan had so many questions, but now, standing in front of her, he wasn't sure where to start. Instead, he simply gestured toward the couch. "Do you want to sit down?" he asked. Lyra nodded and walked over to the couch, sitting down beside him. The space between them felt more natural now, no longer filled with the heavy weight of uncertainty. There was a quiet comfort in the air, as if the chaos of the last few hours had allowed them to come to some kind of unspoken understanding. "I've been thinking," Ethan said after a moment, his voice tentative, "about what you said about your people, the Velari." Lyra looked at him, her eyes calm but distant. "You still have questions," he nodded. I don't understand why you didn't tell me sooner. Why keep it a secret? I mean, I know it's personal, but I thought we were getting along. I thought we were friends." Lyra sighed, running a hand through her hair. "I never meant to lie to you, Ethan. I never wanted to keep this from you. But the truth is, I've never had to explain my people to a human before. I didn't know how to. I didn't want to scare you. I didn't want you to think I was. Different, Ethan frowned, but you are different. Lyra met his gaze, her expression softening. Yes, I am, but I'm still me. I'm still the same person you've been living with these past few weeks. Ethan nodded slowly, absorbing her words. I get it now. I mean, I don't completely understand what it's like to be you, but I can't imagine what it must feel like to go through something like this alone. Lyra smiled faintly, but there was a sadness behind it. It's not easy, but it's part of who I am. It's part of what makes me Velari. There was a pause, and Ethan could feel the weight of her words. They weren't just an explanation of what had happened. They were a glimpse into her life, into the struggles she faced that he couldn't fully comprehend. I just wish I could do more for you, he said, his voice sincere. I don't know if I can ever truly understand what it's like for you, but I don't want you to feel like you're alone. Lyra's eyes softened. I'm not alone. Not anymore, she paused, as if choosing her words carefully. You've been more help to me than you realize, Ethan, just by being here, just by not running away. Ethan gave a small, appreciative smile. I'm not going anywhere. They sat in silence for a few moments, the weight of everything they had been through settling between them. Lyra leaned back against the couch, her gaze distant but peaceful. Ethan felt a sense of calm he hadn't expected. He was still processing everything that had happened, but for the first time that night, he felt like he understood. I don't want you to think I'm just some charity case, Lyra said, her voice quiet but steady. I'm not helpless, Ethan, I'm still strong. I've been through a lot, and I will again. The wild season doesn't last forever, but I don't want you to feel like you have to carry all of it for me. Ethan shook his head. I don't think you're a charity case, Lyra, and I'm not carrying anything for you. I'm just trying to be here for you, that's all. She looked at him, her expression soft but filled with gratitude. I appreciate that. You don't know how much it means to me. Ethan smiled, feeling lighter than he had in hours. I guess we're both in this together, huh? Lyra nodded, her lips curving into a small, genuine smile. Yeah, together. For the first time since Lyra had shared the truth about herself, Ethan felt like he was starting to understand her. She wasn't just a roommate. She wasn't just some alien who had found herself on Earth. She was someone who had a past, a life, a struggle, and now somehow she had him as part of it. As the hours drifted on and the sun began to rise, casting a soft glow through the apartment windows, Ethan realized that whatever lay ahead, whatever challenges or mysteries they would face together, he was ready for them. They were no longer just two strangers living in the same space. They were allies, friends even, and that was something Ethan wasn't willing to walk away from. The apartment felt different now. Not just because of the energy Lyra had brought into his life, but because of the connection they had formed. The wild season was still a part of her, and it wasn't over yet, but Ethan knew he would stand by her, no matter what came next. The night was finally over. And with the dawn, a new chapter began for both of them.